And welcome to episode 5 of Balling Out. Thank you for taking your time to be with us today. I'm your host, JJ, and I'm joined by BZ and Matt. Guys, give them away, say hello, do whatever you need to do to introduce yourselves. Welcome, welcome.
Hey,
If anyone's got any questions as to why it's light where I am, I'm currently abroad at the minute, staying at some friends, so hence the background
where?
and the time way in the Arizona.
Seriously?
Yeah.
As a joke, I was gonna say Arizona as well. I'm like, when did you move to Arizona? Because I'm like, yeah, because it has that feel.
Yeah, no. It's a nice place. But anyway, we digress and let's focus on why we're here today. And why we're here today is to talk about the NBA, but specifically, literally within the last hour and a half, maybe even less, a massive deal has been done in the NBA where we've seen an all-star player in Donovan Mitchell for the Utah Jazz be traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The deal was absolutely massive in terms of what the Utah Jazz get. The Utah Jazz get three players, the main one being Colin Sexton, as well as 3 first-round picks and 2 pick
Mm.
swaps. So for those who are not aware, a first-round pick is you have the lottery, you have a draft, you pick a player. So they've got 3 of those, which is pretty impressive. And they've got 2 pick swaps, which means when they have a pick and the Cavs have a pick, if the pick that the Cavs have is higher than the Utah pick, they can swap. So it could result in them having 5 picks, 3 players. But the Cleveland Cavaliers have picked up Donovan Mitchell, and our experience in trades like this tells us that when you get the best player, typically you win the trade. What I'd like to ask you two today is, what are your thoughts on the impact of this trade, not just on the team in question that have received the All-Star player, but potentially league-wide? I'd like to start with you, Deezy, on what your thoughts are, and then we'll move on. And bear in mind, guys, that it's such a new trade. It's really difficult for us to really piece together what's happening, but let's try and be as reactive as we can.
Okay, I think the Jazz are rebuilding. They traded Gobert last month, so I think it's like the second point in July, second part of the rebuild. So they brought in young players and lottery picks or draft picks, which they hope will turn into lottery picks. So I think for them, I guess they realized that they could only go so far with Gobert and Mitchell, who didn't particularly look like they even like playing together. So it's a good trade for Utah. As for the Cavaliers, yeah, I mean I don't know how much Donovan Mitchell's gonna like being in Cleveland. He's going from like growing up in the New York area to Utah, to now Cleveland. I guess he's in the NBA though, so. But I hope
Spoken
for
like
his
a true Knicks fan.
I hope for his sake that the team's competitive. But I think the Cavs got some good young players. To be fair, they did really well last year, so they look like they're a team with potential. So adding him should make them a playoff team. So yeah, I think it's a win for both teams.
Okay, understood. And it's rare that you get a situation where you get a win-win like that. Speaking about the team, Matt, you've got Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, potentially Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen as a starting 5. That sounds pretty formidable from the names that I've just listed there. What are your thoughts specifically on what this does for the Cavs, not just the team today, but also for the next few years?
Yeah, I think this trade is really great for the Cavs, especially because the 2 players or the main 2 players that were included in this trade was Colin Sexton, who didn't even play with them last season due to injury, and Laurie Markkinen, who was coming off the bench. So I don't really think they've lost anything significant in terms of the team that they were building this season, which everyone kind of said had a lot of promise. I like the backcourt now. I think Mitchell and Garland. I think that's a decent backcourt. Whether that's kind of enough to make a huge statement in the East, I'm not too sure. I don't believe so. I think Mobley is obviously one player that people have a lot of high hopes on. I think if he can ascend to maybe the Garland All-Star level, I think they could be kind of a force to be reckoned with in the future. But in terms of next season, I would kind of have them as a stonewall playoff team. Whether they can make it past the first or second round, though, I don't particularly see. However, it's still a young team, so it'll be interesting to see how those players develop in the future.
Okay, so this team that we're talking about is a team that had one of the best defenses in the league last year, quite easily. And then they had a few injuries and a few changes and whatnot, which impacted the team. And then they had a bit of a dip and a lull. But now they've literally brought in arguably a top 15 offensive player. So they've got Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley at the back, who are going to anchor a formidable back line. And now they've got Garland and Mitchell in backcourt to score at least 50 points a game and put supreme amount of pressure on other teams. DZ, do you feel like this is enough to vault them into that top 4 of the East? And when I say top 4, we're talking the likes of the Bucks, we're talking the Celtics, and depending on who you'd want to put in there, whether it's Miami, Philly, or whoever else, do you think this puts them in that top echelon of teams? Because by the sounds of what Matt is saying, it doesn't necessarily put them as a lock to even get past the first round, let alone get to the semis and the finals. So what are your thoughts in terms of where it puts them in the pantheon of the East?
I think right now I'd say no. It doesn't make them as good as the Bucks, the Heat, the Celtics, that elite core in the East. But I will say it's a really young team, so they have time to develop. I mean, nobody really saw them doing what they did last year until they had the injuries. So I think Donovan Mitchell is 25 years old, about 10, 25. So then everyone else is younger than him. So the potential for them to grow and get better and to grow collectively is definitely there. And I think, they're going to get better as the future kind of goes along. And then who knows what might happen? Giannis might lead the Bucks. Something might happen in Miami or Boston also. I think the potential is there moving forward. Maybe not this season, but I think the age alone means that they're going to get better. They're a really young team. Like, I think a lot of the guys are 23 and below. So they have time. They have time.
Yeah.
And in Cleveland, there's no real expectation, to be honest. So, I mean, they have time.
Yeah. No, I think we're all in agreement that this trade works well for both teams. It works well for Utah because now they've got 10 draft picks in the first round over the next 4 years, which is a sizable haul. What I will say to that, however, is that teams like OKC and others have collected draft picks for years and have not really managed to translate those draft picks into actual success on the court. Philly managed to do it with their particular process, but they ended up getting one player that they still have now, and that's Embiid. So all you need to do really is hit once, and it can transform your team. So yeah, they've got 10 shots. So good luck to them, I guess. Matt, question about the impact that this potentially has on the rest of the league, in the sense that Utah now have gotten rid of their 2 best players, but they still have a number of players on that team that are slightly older. So you've got Mike Conley, you've got Bogdanovic, you've got Beasley, you've got Clarkson, and you've got others. Where potentially do you see those guys moving within the NBA, if anywhere? Because I imagine the Utah Jazz are not looking to hold on to those players whilst they're trying to tank and get higher draft picks.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I can see Bogdanovic kind of fitting into pretty much any team. I think he can be a very useful player with his ability to shoot the 3 for any decent team in the East or the West. Mike Conley is very interesting because I don't really think there's a team who is looking to contend within the next couple of years or even now that is really in need of a point guard. I think that the point guard position is kind of filled with most teams. I guess maybe the Bucks, if so, but that would be a very hard trade to pull off. So with Mike Conley, I think it'll be interesting to see where he kind of ends up. But I wouldn't be surprised if they pretty much just end up staying as it is. I think with the draft picks that they have accumulated and with the level of players that they have now, with the likes of Conley and Bogdanovic, I don't see them as players that will kind of propel them into a high seed in the West. I still think they'll be out of the play-in possibly with the players they have now. So I think their draft picks will still be intact and they'll still be able to use it in the next couple of years.
Okay, understood. And DZ, look,
Can I just add something to Matt's point? I think.
Yeah, of course.
I think I can see the Lakers in need of a point guard. So if they're able to, to shift, that would they have, That Mike Conley. The only thing about him is that he's had really bad luck of injuries, but he's a solid player, you know. But I think him on the Lakers would be good because I think he's a pretty decent shooter. He can handle the rock. He's a good team player. You know, he's really well thought of around the NBA. I think he's had really bad luck the last 2 years of injuries. I don't know, just he's had really bad luck. But
So
I think maybe
who would you trade if you were the Lakers for Conley? I mean, look, I'm making an assumption in my head who that will be, but what kind of package would you put together as the Lakers to the Utah Jazz to bring back Conley, though?
I mean the Jazz are rebuilding, right? So you know, you said I mean, have like they still got those two picks, right?
Yeah, 27 and 29.
Yeah, I'll send those two picks and Russ, and then find ways to make the salaries work.
So you'd bring back Conley. Okay, so as a person who kind of follows the Lakers quite a lot myself, I don't like that deal for the fact that the Lakers don't need a very good point guard. They just need a serviceable one. And Conley is 34, injury prone. And we've seen from the last 4 years that LeBron and AD are already injury prone players. And Pat Bev, which we'll talk about in the third segment, he's 34 and injury prone. So you're
That
basically
explains why I like the deal so much, man.
yeah. So the sense I'm getting is you're more looking at making the Lakers worse and making sure LeBron doesn't get a ring as opposed to improving the Lakers. And this is the kind of spite that we need to avoid injected into these conversations. But look, I get what you're saying. You're trying to make them worse. That's part of your appeal. But on the subject, Deezy, as a Knicks fan, sorry, how does this Donovan Mitchell deal feel to you in regards to the hope that you had of becoming a non-playoff team to a potential play-in team?
I mean, it sucks, but I think if the teams couldn't make a deal, and I think apparently the Jazz were asking for a lot of lottery picks, a lot of draft picks. So the Knicks gave them a deadline of up until Monday night to say, listen, unless we come to an agreement, we're basically going to pay our guy. And then he acquires what's called the poison pill, which means that if you acquire him, his salary, I think, trebles basically in terms of how much it's going to actually come into effect on your books. So if someone's making 10 mil, on your books, it's show up as 27 mil. So basically makes him really hard to trade. And I like RJ Barrett. You know, he's his stats are pretty good for for a young player. I think only 4 people in NBA history have managed to score as many points and rebounds as he has at this age. LeBron.
How many?
I think there maybe 4 players that I saw. There was LeBron, Kobe, and I think 2 other guys that have been able to score as many points, get as many rebounds as he has at this point of the season. I mean, at this point of his career. So he's a pretty solid guy, and I think he's going to get better. But obviously, I'd rather have a star in Donovan Mitchell. But if the price is too high, then it's too high. The Jazz were asking for a lot. I mean, they got how many picks for Gobert? Was it 4 or 5 picks?
Yeah, 5, I think. Yeah.
I mean, for Rudy Gobert, that's a haul. So people think that that Minnesota overpaid. So yeah, I kind of respect that the Knicks didn't mortgage our future. So yeah, I mean, if Donovan Mitchell was a top 10 player, in his prime, it's different. But yeah, so that's how I feel about it. It would be nice to have him, but at the same time, it's not have him at any cost because we've done that with Carmelo Anthony, and we kind of gave up our team basically, and he had no one to play with. So I'm glad we didn't agree to give up too much.
So you're okay with the decision that the Knicks took to not mortgage the future to get Donovan Mitchell? Yeah. So Matt, and we're segueing onto this discussion around the RJ Barrett contract. So recently, RJ Barrett signed a contract extension, a rookie extension, for an additional 4 years on top of his current deal, which puts him with the Knicks for the next 5 or 6 years, I believe. The deal itself isn't a max. It's a little bit off the max. So they've obviously not said we believe you are a max player, but they've given him a significant chunk of change over the course of the contract. What are your thoughts on what this signals to and what impact this has on the New York Knicks based on them committing to a player of RJ Barrett's stature?
I actually feel sorry for the Knicks because I think with the pending decision of whether to give in to the demands of the Utah Jazz for Donovan Mitchell, whilst trying to decide whether to give RJ Barrett this extension, I don't even think it's not a lose-lose, but it's not a win-win either. I think acquiring Donovan Mitchell for me would have been giving up a whole lot for a player who wouldn't even guarantee playoff a playoff position. And for RJ Barrett, I know obviously BZ mentioned that at this age, only 4 players have as many points, as many rebounds, but he's a player that I kind of find a bit confusing. I don't really know what he does well. He seems to be a bit all right at everything. He went 3rd in the same draft as Zion and Ja, and got players like Garland and Jordan Poole went after him, and I feel like they've had a bit more presence in the NBA, more presence than he has anyway. So I don't know. I don't see the star quality with him. So with the Knicks deciding to re-sign him, I don't actually think it does much. If anything, I just think the Knicks, they've just had bad luck, man. I just think not getting that 1st or 2nd pick in 2019, KD and Kyrie and Kawhi and Jimmy Butler refusing to come there. Yeah, it doesn't get any better for the Knicks. They're gonna have to wait for another kind of year where some high-level free agents are available.
But don't you think, and on the subject, Matt, about bad luck, that a lot of it is self-inflicted, right? You know, it's like saying a guy who slipped down a drain had bad luck, but he's walking across a drain with no manhole. Like, yes, it's bad luck, but he created that luck. They've made some very bad decisions in terms of their trades and their drafts. And this is the first time that the New York Knicks have actually extended a rookie since the 1990s Charlie Ward. Just think about that.
And that's why for me they had to do it, because they had to break that trend.
And I was going to say, like, as much as I understand what you're saying in terms of RJ Barrett doesn't necessarily move the needle, he's been in the league for 2 years. He's improved clearly every year he's been there. He's a shooting guard that's not being paid the max. He's got 20 points per game last year and is getting better. Their options were thin. They didn't overpay. And like I said, they haven't extended a rookie for over 20 years, which suggests to me that they've mismanaged their assets, because you're bringing in a player at a high lottery position, and then you're investing time, effort, and energy to get him to a point, and then he's leaving. So I do agree in the sense that RJ Barrett doesn't move the needle massively, but I do think that this signals that the New York Knicks are starting to realize we can't get free agents like we think we can. We're not the team we think we could be. We need to focus on the other way. And the good thing about the NBA is you get 3 ways to get players. You can draft them, you can do free agents, or you can trade. It's pretty clear that trading doesn't really work for them. Pretty clear that free agents have shunned them, whether it's KD or Kyrie, whether it's LeBron, Wade, and Bosh back in 2010. The great players are not going to New York. So they have to draft. They have to draft well. And it looks like they've got a player in their midst that is, I'd say, is a B or maybe a B- player. But you need a couple of B-, and then when you get that hit with an A, you've got a supportive team around you. So I do hear what you're saying. I just think that this is something they needed to do. And I agree with you, DZ, in the sense that they should not have overpaid for Donovan Mitchell, because that would have put them in a position where they've pretty much paid max slots, essentially, to a backcourt that hasn't really demonstrated any aptitude on defense, is small, and hasn't really demonstrated in the playoffs that they're a success. So I actually like the deal, but I do understand what your reservations are. DZ, have you got anything you want to add to the point around RJ Barrett, or anything that I or Matt have said in regards to that?
Yeah, I think you're right, Jermaine. I think in order to acquire like a star, you need to have some pieces that are kind of there. For example, when LeBron came back to Cleveland, they had a young Kyrie. When KD and Kyrie went to Brooklyn, they had all the pieces over there. So they didn't have any A's, but they had a bunch of B's. You know, they had a bunch of guys of potential. And so I think you need to kind of begin to like put those guys together. So one day when a star like maybe say Giannis, who said that he won't be in Milwaukee forever, if he ever comes in the market and you look, hold on, they've got RJ Barrett, they've got this guy, they've got this guy. They've got a decent, they've got a decent team over there. Giannis might
Don't do it.
I just said, you said, this. I don't think there's a part of, I haven't lived there. I don't think there's a part of the U.S. that's got more Greeks and Nigerians in New York. So I think Giannis. I'm just saying. So you need those B players, So when the starters become available, he thinks, you know what, actually, it wouldn't be such a bad landing place. I think you need to begin to build good culture. And by that, you need to pay your young players, develop them. And then one day somebody might look and think, you know what, actually, why not?
Look, aside from your terrible pitch for New York being the epicenter for Greeks and Nigerians, I hear you. I hear you. Matt, anything else you want to add to the RJ Barrett discussion, excluding the fact that Giannis is definitely not going to the Knicks?
Yeah, I think you guys have made fair points in regards to so building a culture and kind of breaking the streak of the Knicks not re-signing any of the draft picks in the past. I don't know. Maybe my reservations more so come from me not really believing in his development as much as maybe you guys do. I don't know. I don't. I don't know. I don't see him, and I guess we'll find out anyway. But I don't see him as someone that would make a high-level free agent want to come to the Knicks. Obviously, they would need to kind of repeat the same thing that they're doing with him with other draft picks in the future. But him in particular, I don't see it. But you guys made fair points.
Yeah, no. I agree with you, Matt. I don't think RJ Barrett on his own is enough to make you want to go there. I think if you think about the Cavs, for example, the Cavs have Garland, the Cavs have Mobley, the Cavs have Allen. They've got a good core, and if RJ Barrett's one of three players that are very good, he with another two or three players, whether it's Jalen Brunson and
Mitchell Robinson.
Mitchell Robinson. Those guys can work well together, and if they can start to make a little bit of a push, I would say the next draft they make is going to be imperative, but then they'll be in a better position to at least make a trade if they need to get rid of one of their players, or they can attract free agents. The point is, the Knicks have failed with trades. The Knicks have failed with free agents. For the first time, I feel like they've actually drafted a player that is good enough to pay, and they haven't maxed him out. So they've given him a relatively good team contract. He's a relatively young player. He hasn't had any signs of injuries. From all accounts, he's improving. This is a good sign and a good step for the Knicks making decisions that actually make sense and are prudent. But I do agree with you. Look, RJ Barrett's not going to be the reason you go to New York. But Donovan Mitchell being in New York with no other players to play with is definitely not a reason to go there. So I guess you're right. There's no win-win. It's more how badly do you want to lose on this one. And DZ, stop talking about Giannis going to New York. You said that about LeBron. You said it about every other big player. Sorry, Matt. This is some historical beef that we have. They ain't going there. They're not going. He said he could see himself in Chicago. That's what he said. He didn't say New York.
No, but he was asked specifically about the Bulls by a Chicago-based reporter, but you know.
Fine. But he said he's open, which means, yeah, he's open. But New York, come on, bro. Stop that talk, man. You just had hope for Donovan Mitchell. You lost him. Don't move up. Don't move your sights up. You need to be going lower, not higher.
Never know, Jokic, you know, but Luka.
Whatever. Anyway, we move on to talk about the Lakers. The Lakers recently acquired Patrick Beverley, a 34-year-old defensive first guard, so 3-and-D point guard, who arguably has had his injury issues over the last 4 years. He's only played 55 games on average over the last 4, but is a top 40 defensive player and a top 10 defensive guard. It's a bit of an interesting decision because they got rid of Taylor Horton-Tucker, who they actually decided to keep instead of Alex Caruso, who's probably a better version of Patrick Beverley. They also got rid of Stanley Johnson, who's their best, I would say, best wing defender, maybe, in terms of size. The argument for the deal, though, is that those two players didn't have a view in the rotation. So they basically got rid of two players on the fringes for a potential starting point guard. Another bit of a wrinkle, and before I ask your guys' opinion, another wrinkle is Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook are not friends. If anything, they are enemies, and they've had multiple situations where Patrick Beverley's injured him in a timeout situation where Westbrook was calling a timeout, and then Pat Bev went for the ball and injured his knee. Westbrook said that Pat Bev is tricking people. He just runs around making a lot of noise, and he's not a good defender. Which Pat Bev then said, effectively,
he's fooling y'all. He said,
affected players the way they treated him. Literally had an impact on a man's mental well-being. And then last year, Westbrook was playing terribly for the Lakers, against the Wolves, and Pat Bev was saying again, he's been tricking you guys. He said to the media that you've been tricked, and was making gestures about Westbrook. Now, just to add the caveat before I pass on to you guys, he has made contact with Westbrook. Apparently, they've had a conversation since he's joined. But Matt, tell me what you think about this deal for the Lakers, what it signifies and the potential impact. And then DZ, if you could follow up with your points as well, that would be great.
I think the best way for me to kind of describe how I'm feeling about it is by saying I like it if Westbrook leaves, but I don't love it in general. I think obviously Pat Bev will kind of give them that perimeter defense that they've been lacking since they had the squad that won it in the bubble with Danny Green and Alex Caruso and so on. However, just like you said, he is aging. He has battled with injuries over the past couple of seasons. Also, I don't think he's the same level of defender he once was, maybe a few years ago as well. But to be fair to him, he is a way better spot-up shooter than Westbrook is. I think he shot 39% from the three-point line last year. And I think he will give them that dogged mentality, that kind of, never say die kind of mentality that I think every championship team needs. So I think in general, it's not a great move. I think it's a good move. Him and Westbrook in the backcourt, though, I do not like. I heard Darvin Ham, the new coach, say that they could be the best defensive backcourt in the league. And I was kind of confused by that because Westbrook isn't really known to be a lockdown defender. So I don't know where he was going with that. But also, I've been seeing that a lot of people within the Lakers organization are kind of bigging up Russ and kind of like a lot of Russ propaganda has been going on. And I'm thinking maybe they are aware of the general perception of him in the league. So they're trying to kind of bump his value up so that teams can be interested in him. Like I think Jeannie Buss said that he was the best player for the team last season. So I don't know. Maybe they're trying to kind of turn the heads because they know that people aren't interested in Russ. But honestly, when this happened, the first thing I thought of was they're getting rid of Russ, and that's the only thing that would really make sense to me with this acquisition of Pat Beverley.
I understand. You make some interesting points there. Right? The Lakers are like the Knicks West in the sense that they make some terrible choices over the last 10 years. But without me going into the details, because it would just pain my soul. DZ, what are your thoughts on the Pat Beverley pickup from the Lakers, and what do you think it portends for the future for the Lakers?
Okay, put it this way.
Oh, wait, sorry. Before you begin, bias aside, so let's be objective on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You know me. It's my middle name. All right. So the first thing I was gonna say, they weren't going to win the championship without Pat Beverley, and they won't win it with him. So, no, but honestly, but you know what? I'm interested to see him and Westbrook because it's quite personal between the two of them. There's the idea that Beverly believes Russell Westbrook cost him money over his career because by him saying he doesn't do anything, he just runs around, he's fooling y'all basically. And the perception of Pat Bev changed a little bit around about that time, and last year when they were playing the Lakers, they got very disrespectful, including from Pat Beverly actually. And whenever Russ would get the ball, Beverly would shout, "He with us, he with us, he's on our team." And like, it just got very ugly between the two of them. So I don't see how they can be teammates. I think I've seen the Lakers like massive talking him up, and I think they're trying to basically pump up his value. But the rest of the league isn't full. Everybody saw him play last year. He was one of the worst shooters in the NBA from 3-point range and from the free throw line. So teams know who Russell Westbrook is. They know what his turnovers are. They know what his attitude is like. You can't paintbrush over that. Basically, you can't airbrush that. It's out there. So I think they're trying to talk up his value. Like even those the Lakers were playing a game at the in Vegas at the not the G League, but at the what's the like the rookie league the summer league.
Summer league, yeah.
Yeah, so Westbrook walks in, LeBron's there. He says hello to everybody else except to LeBron. And LeBron doesn't make any attempt to say hello to him either. And they just sit there across from each other. Westbrook talking to the coaches, talking to the young players, talking to everybody except LeBron. Doesn't make eye contact, doesn't go over there. Same for LeBron. Spoke volumes. Those guys, LeBron can say what he wants publicly, but people saw. So the Lakers are trying to pump up his value because they know that they need to get rid of him to make a push next season. And yeah, but I think they will try. I think because they spent the whole summer making calls about Westbrook. So suddenly, the guy that you're trying to trade is now your best player. Nobody's buying that, And if they are, I've got a bridge in London called London Bridge that I'm willing to sell anybody. But yeah, I think they're going to move Westbrook if they can, and Beverly will make them better defensively because he does have heart. He does play hard. But at the same time, I think like he made some comments about his former teammate Karl Anthony Towns made some comments about him when he said that after the Wolves won the play-in game to make the playoffs, and Beverly was celebrating that they just won an NBA title, and Karl Towns doesn't say anything normally about anybody. He came out and said that's when I knew we had to get rid of him. When I saw him jump on that table, like we just won something and we just basically won a play-in game, so that's when I knew we had to get rid. So so Pat Beverly, and like he's not getting any younger. He'll be 35 next year. He's an aging guard who's becoming more injury prone. I mean, he has to work because he's had to work on his game because of his career path, so he can't shoot. So at least that's going to be there. I think it makes the Lakers better, and I think THT was a better player, but his time in terms of he needs the ball, and he's going to be better. Like the Lakers in win now mode, basically. THT is in maybe 2, 3, 4 years, so I can see why they made that move. I think it makes the Lakers better. It makes Russ more likely to leave as well, and so I think it's a win for the Lakers. It's a win for Pat Bev as well. He goes from Minnesota back to LA where he loves to live, and it puts him on a team that's likely to do to make more noise than the T-Wolves. I think personally.
Look, I appreciate your objective view, DZ, and the statement that brings out to me is they're not going to win with him. They ain't going to win without him. And that's what matters, right? Everything else is just window dressing after you make that comment. Matt, on the subject, we talk about the Westbrook situation and the fact that it's probably untenable and they're talking it up. It doesn't sound like they're talking it up to prepare him to stay. It sounds like they're talking it up to prepare to trade him. So based on the deals you've heard in the market, the deals for, I think there's a Utah Jazz deal where they were looking at Bogdanovich, Conley, and another player, Malik Beasley or someone along those lines. There's a deal with the Indiana Pacers where they're looking at Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Based on what you've heard around the league, what deal do you think is the deal that the Lakers should pursue the most and give up their 2 draft picks and whatever else they need to do to get them to a point where they're at least in contention? Maybe not the upper tier, but at least in contention for a championship.
The best one I've heard is the one involving the Indiana Pacers, and I think that actually includes the Spurs as well. And from what I read, I think the Spurs will end up with Westbrook, but they would buy him out. So I don't even think they'd keep him. And I think that just speaks volumes as to the general perception of Westbrook. But if the Lakers could get Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, I think that would give them more perimeter shooting. Miles Turner too can shoot the 3. I think he's the best shooting big man in the league, or one of the best. He can also protect the rim as well. So their interior will be secure. It will mean AD doesn't have to play the 5 where he doesn't love playing anyway. And with Pat Bev, LeBron, Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, and Anthony Davis, I think the Lakers can definitely at least make it to the second round. At least. That would be my expectation if they would manage to get hold of those 2 players.
DZ, what are your thoughts in terms of potential deals that are in the market for Westbrook and what could potentially improve the Lakers the most? You're on mute. Is your hate that deep that the computer's muted?
I was gonna say it's tough because everybody's, the tape's out there. People saw what happened last year. I was watching First Take, and Stephen A. Smith was saying he went to go watch a Lakers game, and he's watching like Westbrook in the layup line, like hit the top of the backboard, and he's watching him try to throw the ball off, to himself, like for a dunk in warm-ups, and it goes above the backboard, and it's just like the tape's out there. And I think even his agent had a pretty public falling out, and his agent basically put it out there. His former agent said, basically, this is where Russell Westbrook is. He needs to basically accept a role, or he's going to get bought out, and that doesn't increase his value around the league, basically. So, I mean,
okay, DZ, look, let's forget about how bad a man is on the layup lines and the fact that his agent and him have got problems. Westbrook's no longer a player that you cover to play. He's an expiring contract, and plus they have to attach draft picks. So really, you're taking him as a favor to the Lakers, and they're paying you for that favor by giving you cap space and giving you draft picks. So
I think the Pacers deal.
Yeah. Oh, and what, for the same reasons Matt said, or for any?
Yeah, no. I think when I looked at the players that are available, I was hoping that they don't do that deal actually. So I should tell you. So I think the deal from Indiana was probably the better one for me. And again, Indiana, no expectations. I mean, I could see him playing there for a year actually, and just hoping them sell tickets. He can go back to getting his. So it'll be a win for both parties, to be honest with you.
So it's interesting you say this, because when I first heard of the Buddy Hield and the Turner deal, I originally thought it was a good trade potentially, because Pat Bev as your 3-and-D guard, you've got Buddy Hield that's he shoots 9.5 threes a game, and he shoots it on average 40% across his career. So he's shooting at Steph Curry level volume with almost Steph Curry level accuracy. Granted, he is a massive liability on defense, but that might be because of the teams he's been on. He's been on Sacramento and Indiana that haven't prized that. With Darvin Ham and with another guard in the backcourt that's strong and having two very, very defensive-minded bigs behind him, it might make him a different player because he's got the length and he played pretty good D in college. Then you've got LeBron, who, when he's around a team that's not performing, he is a terrible leader. He's a terrible person to have on your team because he is locked. He's checked out. But on a team that has contention, he can make some noise on both ends of the floor. Then you've got AD and Miles Turner. So I say all of this to say that would be a very strong team. My issue, however, is in the playoffs, the best lineup for the Lakers has always been AD at the 5 and LeBron at the 4. The best lineups for the Lakers has always been two-way players playing with LeBron and AD. Buddy Hield is not a two-way player and has no experience in the playoffs. He's not tried, he's not tested, and there's no demonstration that he's actually been able to lock in and defend the player at a high level. Miles Turner, as good as he is on the defensive end, he is very vulnerable to guards, pick and rolls. Like we were discussing last week, Matt, in regards to pick and rolls, he's very vulnerable and flat-footed. And again, he moves AD to the 4, which makes the Lakers not as good as they could be. So I like the trade in that it makes them better than they are. I just don't think it makes them a contender in the playoffs because those two players I cannot see in the ending lineup. I'd more likely see Austin Reeves and JTA finish the game than those two because those two can actually defend. And granted, they're not great shooters, but they can defend and adequately score. So I do hear what you're both saying. My personal preference is the Utah Jazz. Bogdanovich, for me, is a two-way player that can shoot and he can defend bigger players. Conley, I wouldn't want any business with him because he's old and his contract's long and you've already got a guard. And LeBron James is already a very strong guard. But if they can get someone like Malik Beasley to come off the bench and do some scoring, or they can get a Clarkson back again to come off the bench and do some scoring, I honestly think that Bogdanovich is the best player that they could possibly get in a deal with any of the teams. And again, Hield and Turner, LeBron, AD, and Pat Bev, regular season looks okay, but 4 of those players are injury prone as well. Miles Turner has injury issues. Pat Bev's got injury issues. LeBron's got injury issues. AD's got injury issues. Miles Turner is going to look for a contract extension. Do you really want to commit a max contract to the likes of Turner and AD for the next 5 years? So I didn't like the Westbrook trade, not just because I didn't think Westbrook fit, but I think that it put the Lakers in a corner where they couldn't pivot out. If they get Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, they're in another corner because no one's going to take Hield this year. Next year, maybe because his contract's quite low at 18 mil. But Turner, you're going to have to pay him or lose him. And if you lose him, you're not getting that cap space back because your team's going to be capped out. So I do hear what you're both saying, but I do think the Utah Jazz is the best option for the Lakers in my view because you get more well-rounded players. Any comments on that before we move on to the next topic?
Nope.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think the problem for the Lakers is, just like you said, the Westbrook deal was so bad that it's going to be very difficult for them to go from being in a situation where with Westbrook, LeBron and AD and all the injuries, they didn't make the play-in, to then all of a sudden manufacturing a package where they get rid of Westbrook, acquire some players and become contenders. I think that, if I'm being honest, is a bit unrealistic. So I think if they can get some players in for Westbrook who could guarantee them at least a second round sort of finish in the Western Conference, I think that's decent. Obviously, it doesn't work well for LeBron because, LeBron is obviously aging, but, that the Westbrook deal really set them back, man.
Yeah, you know what? The Westbrook deal was a culmination of setbacks that team has had. They've made a lot of bad decisions, like giving THT a 3-year deal. And for those who don't necessarily follow the contract, they gave him a player option, which means that if you trade him now, he's a terrible contract because if he plays really badly, he'll opt into the contract. But if he plays really well, he'll opt out. So he doesn't have any value as a contract. So you just
it's a win-win for him.
Yeah, you've pretty much got a 21-year-old guy who you've put all this investment in, and you give him a team unfriendly deal, and you've chosen him over Alex Caruso, who started in the NBA Finals, who demonstrated to you that he is arguably one of the best guards that you could ever have next to LeBron because he doesn't have an ego, doesn't want the ball. He literally wants to defend the hell out of a guy, and that is it. So
played well in Chicago as well last season.
Exactly. They got Dennis Schroeder and then nearly paid him $84 million. And he said no, which was stupid for both people. It was stupid for the Lakers to offer it, and it was stupid for him to say no. Now he's on a minimum deal potentially. He ain't even got a minimum deal yet. So the Lakers, like I said last time, in the last 9 years, they've been to the playoffs once. And they've had LeBron for 4 years. Injuries aside, for me, that team is not very well run. They don't make good decisions on free agents. They don't make good decisions on drafts. The draft is actually somewhere where they've actually been very strong. That's a lie. They've got Larry Nance Jr., Kyle Kuzma. They've got a lot of good guys in the lower tiers, and they've done
Randall
well on the higher ends. Yeah, so drafting is one thing they do well.
BI.
But, Matt, to your point, to go from Westbrook to a contender, I mean, no team has traded Westbrook and got back a haul that's made them a contender. So it doesn't bode well for them. I just feel like if the Lakers have a healthy AD and a healthy LeBron and a team around them that just do their role, I honestly believe they can make some challenges because I don't think they underperformed last year just because of Westbrook. I think they underperformed because their other free agents they picked up, Kent Bazemore, they had Carmelo Anthony. They had 6 free agents, and only one of them is still got a team. Malik Monk. All 5 of their players that they had, Howard, Melo, all of them gone. So that tells you literally picked up players in the bargain basement at the end of their contract, and they added no value. This year, they've picked up the likes of JTA, Damon Jones. They picked up Lonnie Walker. These are not guys that are going to move the needle in terms of making you a championship team, but they're young legs. They'll get you through the regular season. They'll prevent your team from getting injured so that when you get to the playoffs, you're a bit more fresh, you're a bit more active. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations about the Lakers throughout the year because, well, they're the Lakers and they've got LeBron, AD, who are arguably 2 top 15 players in the league. So they're worth discussing. So last week we had a conversation around where does Curry? No, Derek Fisher made a comment about Curry being in the same category as Kobe, Shaq, and Duncan, and Matt and Tony were saying that he definitely fits within or can fit within that category for a number of reasons. Deezy was saying that those categories are a bit askew in the sense that Shaq doesn't belong with Kobe and Duncan, and Steph more sits in the Shaq sort of area as opposed to the Duncan and Kobe area. And the reasons for that were not a two-way player and hasn't had the individual longevity of success that those two players have sustained. Well, it led me to think about another question that a person asked me the other day. When you look at Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, if their career stopped today, ended today, game done, over, who would you honestly say was the better player? Now, I'm not saying who's the most successful. I'm not saying who's the most charismatic or well-liked. I'm saying looking at a player, you've got Steph Curry and you've got KD. Honestly, who do you think is the better player and why? And I'll start with you, DZ, on this one.
Right. I think, for basketball reasons alone, on the court, I'd say Kevin Durant. I think purely because of his size, it's hard. You can't coach height. There's things you can't coach length. And I think his ability on the defensive end is massive in terms of he's much better than Steph on that end. And he's a bit of a hybrid in that he shoots like a guard, but he's 7 foot basically. So he can score he's a 3-range scorer. So he can score the rim, mid range, 3-point line. Free throw shooting is really good. So I think I would take, because I think the thing that Steph Curry probably does better, I'd probably say is an intangible, and that appears to be leadership. But I would say as an actual basketball player, in terms of what he actually brings when he's with the ball or off the ball, I would take Kevin Durant, who I think talent-wise is a top 10, 15 player easily on talent alone. But if you're looking at all the other intangibles, leadership, reliability, consistency, being able to see a vision, being able to be loyal to your team, I think that's when Curry wins out. But I'll say from a purely basketball on court point of view, like if you're going to the park today and you're going to pick one guy, you're playing for 1,000 pounds, or say the aliens come to Earth today, and they said, right, we need 4 or 5 players, and you've got to pick between Steph Curry and KD. Comes up to be your 5th guy. I'm taking KD, just because I think he's his game is just to be able to shoot at that height, to shoot like he can, it's just all world basically. So I think I'll take him, and because of his height and his length as well on defense, which would help him protect the rim more. If you look at his last year in Golden State, in the last 2 years, and he was really good on defense, and was really focusing on that end, and he was starting to protect the rim a bit more. Then he got injured. So I think I would probably take Kevin Durant, even if I'd rather. From a personal point of view, I'd prefer Steph Curry, but from aliens come to Earth today, we need 4 guys. Pick one guy. I'm taking KD.
Cool. So it looks like we've got a script for Space Jam 3 there. Matt, what are your thoughts on Durant versus Curry? And for those who are watching, Matt is an ardent Warriors fan, so this will definitely be an interesting one.
Yeah, I objectively speaking, I think just based on just pure ability and skill set, I think KD is a better basketball player than Steph. As DZ mentioned, I think he's a more versatile scorer. I think he can score in more ways than Steph can, particularly from the mid-range. He's a better defender. When he was at Golden State, he also became a very capable rim protector as well. I think the problem with this discussion is if KD is, I think, undeniably the better player. As we saw when he joined the Warriors, he was the better player. In the finals, he won finals MVP, deservedly so. But I think if their careers were to end now, Steph would be ranked higher than him. Because I think if you look at the context of everything that they've both done in the game, I think Steph's one, or what Steph has done, has proven to be more impactful when it comes to contributing to winning basketball. So I think that's where the kind of the difficult thing with this conversation is. I think KD's the better player, but in an all-time ranking at this point now, if their careers were to end now, I think Steph will be ranked higher.
DZ, thoughts on that?
Which is what I agree. I think when you look at the intangibles, like leadership, Steph has never thrown his team under the bus before. in terms of like in public or demanding a trade. Not that he's had because he's been in the Warriors, but I think when you look at his overall impact, he's changed the game of basketball as well. So people are going to factor that into it. So I think if I think so. I think, if, for example, if you're looking at the top 10 list of NBA players now, a lot of people would have Steph Curry at number 10 or number 11 around there, 10 or 11, and you wouldn't have KD in there just because of like he's gone to Brooklyn and he's won one playoff series and it's going to be what 3-4 years now, and he couldn't get the Thunder over the hump. So people are going to factor all of that stuff in, but I think they're going to factor in the years in Brooklyn as well, especially watching. Obviously, he's playing on a worse team, but he got swept by the Celtics and Steph beat him in six. So yeah. So I think Steph would be ranked higher purely based on accomplishments as well. He's won 4 championships. Unanimous MVP, changed the game. So I think all of those things, would put Steph higher. But in terms of like on a just one game alone for your life, yeah, I'll take KD. But I think
So
Steph.
we've moved away from the aliens, and now it's a life and death situation. you're into this, and you're not even a sci-fi guy, so I don't know where you're getting these analogies
Nah.
from, bro.
I'm not, but yeah.
So both of you, from what I'm hearing, both of you were saying that talent alone, baller, NBA guy, just focused on bouncing that ball, putting the ball in the hoop, doing the back and forth, gym rat. KD's a better player, but the greater player, maybe use the more appropriate word, the greater player would be Curry based on accomplishments, based on his standing, his impact, and some of the things that you can't measure on a court, but are measured by the output on the court in terms of the team's winning, the team's record, the players being happy, the lack of discord, the absence of drama and things of that nature. So, I've got a question then. So, Kevin Durant was drafted and joined Seattle Sonics, and then that team got disbanded, and then he moved to Oklahoma City, and his coach was, I think, PJ Carlissimo initially, and then was Scotty Brooks, who had him in. I think he was as a shooting guard, and then he went to a free, and all sorts of a madness. And then they drafted the immutable Russell Westbrook and others. And Curry, on the other hand, was drafted by the Golden State Warriors, where they had Mark Jackson, who, as much as he didn't necessarily carry that team to a championship, they had a very strong record in the time that he was there for a team that had accomplished nothing. He every year they improved their record. They got Klay Thompson, who is arguably the best compliment you could ever have to a Steph Curry. They got Draymond Green. They had David Lee. They had a number of players there that culturally allowed that team to flourish. So we talk about Steph Curry like he's a winner, he's a leader, he's a committed champion. Do you think that if Durant was on the Golden State Warriors from day one and Curry was on the Oklahoma City Thunder, that Curry would have the same legacy of winning compared to Durant? Matt, I'll start with you on that one.
Oh, that's a good question. I think that hypothetical, I think the substitution in that question, I think it's very hard to judge, because what I would say is if Curry had gone to OKC, they probably obviously Westbrook got drafted before him, so if they drafted Westbrook, they wouldn't have drafted Curry. But all things being equal, I think the problem for the problem with Durant and OKC was they let him down when they refused to go into luxury tax for James Harden at the time when James Harden was coming off the bench and winning Sixth Man of the Year. So in that case, I do understand the point about Kevin Durant not being in an organization as that was as good as Steph to help him kind of impact winning more. But what I would say is, after OKC, he's pretty much got to choose where he's gone, and he chose to join Steph. And after he won with Steph, he then chose to go to Brooklyn. And so with the way those situations have panned out, especially the one in Brooklyn, I I don't know if I could say confidently that Kevin Durant would have transformed the Golden State Warriors in the same way that Steph has, just because I've seen him get his ideal situation and still not perform.
Not perform on the court.
Well, still not, win, essentially.
Okay, so there's a difference there because he and to your point, he's made decisions after OKC that you would argue have cost him winning. Like leaving the Golden State Warriors in 2019. If you want to win, that's arguably one of the worst decisions you could ever make because that team has Curry, Thompson, and Dre. They have a winning culture. And to your point, forget the fact that he wasn't drafted there. He went there in his peak. So he had the opportunity to be there. And when he got there, he was the best player and was winning finals MVP. So and then going to Brooklyn and now he's asked out and now he's still there. So what you're basically getting at is his personality, regardless of his circumstance, would have dictated the fact that he wouldn't have been able to be that leader type person because he's had the opportunities since then and hasn't made the most of them. Is that effectively what you're saying?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, DZ, what are your thoughts on what my question was and anything that Matt has said?
Yeah, I think definitely Steph was drafted into a better environment. But I think at the same time, KD played with Russell Westbrook and he played with two MVPs. They weren't at their peak yet, but they were on the way, and it's obvious you could see the talent. So I think he has played with talented players. Serge Ibaka was a very good player at one point. Kendrick Perkins as well was a very solid big. So it's not like he didn't have any talent with him in OKC.
And they got to the finals.
They got to the finals.
Pretty well, yeah.
So I mean, I can see both your points, but I do kind of think Steph's overall impact and leadership is a big thing. People will have to want to play with you. You have to be able to be able to lead people. If people want to follow you, then you can have all the talent in the world and it won't work. And I think in Brooklyn, it hasn't really worked out so far because he's attached his wagon to Kyrie. Because at the same time, I mean, you have to, when you're looking at these, determining who's great, I think you have to look at everything. And it's the littlest thing that can make a difference. I mean, KD hasn't picked situations that are championship conducive apart from the Warriors. Like leaving Golden State that's not you trying to win a title. The team that's made the finals 4 years in a row. Leaving to go to Brooklyn as well to go play with Kyrie. I don't know if you thought you could change Kyrie, but yeah. So for me personally, I would take Steph Curry, and I do think his intangibles would mean that he would have been a success. I think about most places. I know for the Knicks, it's one of our biggest regrets is either Steph Curry when the pick before we're going to get him. And Steph, I said in his pre-draft video, the Knicks has said, if you're there, we'll pick you. That would hurt.
Matt, DZ, if the Knicks drafted Steph Curry, do we honestly believe he would have even one championship by now if he stayed on that team? In fact, that's Matt. Forget asking Matt because I know Matt doesn't think they would. DZ, do you think that if they drafted Steph Curry, that they would actually be able to get a championship?
I think they would have.
You reckon?
Back then,
they've had poor roster construction for the last 25 years, based on the fact that the last time we got to the finals was 1999 with Patrick Ewing and the gang. The fact that they've not had any good free agents really come there. The best person they traded for was Melo, and they did that 6 months before he was a free agent where they could have got him for nothing. You honestly believe that organization would have been able to build a team around Steph Curry?
Absolutely. I think we'd have had Carmelo Anthony back then still. And we still had some other pieces if you look at when he was actually drafted. So I think absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. Optimism abounds as per usual. Matt, you can answer that if you want, and I'll before I move on to my last question.
Yeah, I actually, they definitely would. The Knicks definitely would not have won a championship with Steph Curry, simply because they wouldn't have had the same level of patience that Golden State had for him when he was battling the ankle injuries. The Knicks would have probably just written him off and got rid of him. And plus, I
would have moved him.
I'm not a big fan of Carmelo Anthony with a point guard like Steph Curry. I think Carmelo needs more so a pass first point guard. So I don't think that combination would have worked. And yeah, it depends on the coach as well. I don't know who the coach was at the time, but I think the chances are he chances are he would not have won a championship with the Knicks. The Knicks are that bad.
The reason I asked the question is I honestly believe that, like with life, your circumstance and your start in the NBA has such a profound impact on how you're perceived as a person and has such a profound impact on how you operate. If we take like LeBron, for example, he got drafted into a Cleveland Cavaliers situation where the best player he had when he was there was Larry Hughes. He got to the finals with the likes of Eric Snow and Boobie Gibson. Contrast that with Jordan. For the first 7 years he was in the NBA, his team wasn't great. They get Pippen, they get Phil Jackson, they get Rodman, they get Kukoc, they get Steve Kerr, they get all these amazing players, and they surround him with greatness. Magic Johnson, he gets drafted to a team with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then they get Magic Worthy and others. Where you start in life and in the NBA is such a profound factor. And we talked about this last week with Duncan as well, which is why I asked the question, would Curry be as great if he wasn't in such a great situation with such a great organization and such a great set of circumstances that allowed him to unlock his brilliance throughout his entire career? And I'm not saying that as a question to be asked. It's more that was the rhetorical nature of why I asked the question around who's better, Kevin or Curry, and if in different situations would it play out different? But Matt and Deezy, you both make a good point that I didn't consider was Durant had 14 years to make good decisions, right? Just like anyone who leaves home at 18 and then are now 40, you can't blame your parents for your decisions. You've had 22 years to fix those changes. You've had 22 years to deal with that trauma. You have to take a level of accountability, and that your responses definitely helped shape my view on your start, because your start is 1 point. You then have choices throughout that start, and you get to decide what comes next and what comes after that. So, yeah, no, look, it's always an interesting topic to discuss. I've had a great time talking to you guys about Donovan Mitchell going to the Cavs. Easy, I'm sorry about that decision. As much as you say you're okay, I know it pains. We covered the RJ Barrett signing, which, again, Matt feels like it doesn't move the needle, which I agree doesn't. But I do think it demonstrates the Knicks have been a bit more prudent, one, with the contract size, and two, with the commitment to the investment they've made in making sure that they've got some solid teams. We covered the Pat Bev situation and how they won't win a championship with him and they won't win one without him. But they need to get rid of Westbrook, and that would at least get them to a point where they can start to push in the playoffs. And the final thing we discussed was Kevin and Curry. And the consensus I get from you guys is Durant, better talent, Curry, better player. Would that be fair?
Yeah, pretty much. That about sums it up, actually, with those two.
Cool. Say no more. Guys, look, it's been a pleasure as per usual. I really enjoy these conversations, and I really hope that people that are listening and tuning in are enjoying it too. Just wanted to add, all three of us, one of us, whoever, is going to continue doing this for the next 5-10 years. And I mentioned this on the chat. We will look back on these conversations and be like, this is where it began, right? This is the beginning of what comes next. And for you, Matt, especially, man, you're the young buck here. You're the young guy. Your level of NBA acumen and the conversations that we're having, you keep having those conversations and you keep pushing those boundaries, and whatever direction you take career-wise, this level of conversation is going to help you articulate your opinion, present your opinion, listen and respond. So whatever you do in the future, it will be helpful. For me and DZ, we're nearly halfway through our run on this planet, so we're going to try and make the most of it while we can. But anyway, guys, thanks for dialing in. DZ, Matt, thanks for your time. Thanks for your input. And we look forward to speaking to you all next week. We are out. Take care.